Hi there students, it's Mr. Verzat. This video is going to look at how to create interior shots in two-point perspective. Now this has worked very well for students between the grades of 7th grade all the way up to senior year in high school. So here we've got your standard VP placement that you're taught when you're learning the skill two-point perspective. Typically you're taught to put the vanishing points on the page, and in general the reason we do this as art teachers is because it makes it easier to manage the skill. It's mainly only effective for beginners though. One of the reasons why I would caution you if you're making serious artwork that has proportion and it looks realistic is don't put your vanishing points on the page because it distorts large forms like this. If we're going to fill up the entire image with an interior, we want it to look realistic. And so if we look at over here, see the outside edge of this rectangle, it's really compressed and small, and likewise over here we've got really sharp angles with all of our perspective. We need to try something different, and I'm going to teach you two new ways to do that. The first way is one vanishing point on and one vanishing point off. One vanishing point on and one vanishing point off. What that does is it allows you to have some areas with really extreme perspective, like say if you're looking down a hallway or looking into a closet or another room or down a street, and it allows you to have an area of perspective that is a little more gentle, where it's not quite as pointy, right? So when you pull a vanishing point off of the page, it allows the angles to get a little flatter. The other way to do your vanishing points is both vanishing points off of the page. Now what this does is it stretches the proportions to be a little flatter for the left and the right side. It's less exaggerated and looks a little bit more realistic. Now this is great for backgrounds and interiors where there's no tunnels or hallways that you're trying to show off. It's also very useful for a product view where you can see more sides of the form and the perspective's not super distorted. This allows you to see how different parts work. So how far do you pull your vanishing points off? It really depends. But as beginners, I'd recommend shooting for at least half of the page width whenever you're starting to experiment with this. If you're only going to pull your VPs a small amount off the page, it's really not going to have much of a noticeable difference. All right, so let's apply this to a couple of examples. Here's several interior shots, and I want you to look at it and follow the angles of the left wall where they converge to, and then the right wall where they converge to. And ask yourself, are the VPs on the page? Is one off and one on, or are both off? Pause the video and take a look. Well, if we look at this one, we've got very extreme angles of perspective over here, lots of like distortion. And then over on this end, it's a little bit more natural. So there is a VP on the page over here someplace. Let's see where it's at. A vanishing point is actually indented and stuck inside the room, and another one is slightly outside. But look at this. The distance between both vanishing points is almost the width of the shot. So that's resulted in very compressed perspective. All right, this is a really nice kitchen. Let's take a look at this. Is it one on, one off, or both off? We've got very extreme perspective over here and very broad and gentle perspective on the other areas. So this would be what the perspective looks like in this area of the room. A little less than half the page width on one side, and again, indented. You'll find out why the VPs are in the shot in a little bit. All right, now so this one's really weird. Both on, one off, one on, or both off. The reason this one looks so different is because the back wall looks almost flat, almost like it's in one-point perspective, but it's not. There's a gentle slope showing that it's going to a left vanishing point. With this one, they had one vanishing point very far off. As a matter of fact, it's probably 1 1/4 page lengths off of the page to the left in order to make that back wall look very flat. Now, one of the vanishing points is actually within probably 1/4 of the entire page because we're looking into another room right here. So we're going to have very compressed perspective. And now, let's talk about that indented vanishing point. When you bring a vanishing point in, it leaves all this other room outside of it. Earlier, when we were learning vanishing points, when you put both of them on the page, you're only dealing with things to the right of the left VP and to the left of the right VP. There's nothing outside that we're working with. When you indent, now you have this space outside of the vanishing point, and it, for an interior, allows you to create another corner. You can see more sides to the room. The challenge is, though, is what vanishing points line up to what? Well, when you're drawing an interior, you need to think, what vanishing point is the boss of that wall? So this wall, the left wall, its boss is the right vanishing point. The center wall, its boss is the left vanishing point. And then this right wall over here, its boss is also the right vanishing point because it's to the right of it. And in perspective, if you can draw a box, you can draw anything. So when you're drawing a room, all you're doing is you're drawing part of a box. You're actually drawing just the back inside parts of the box for the room. You're ignoring the rest of the cube and only focusing on some of the corners and the walls when you work in an interior. So now you've got your paper, you understand the concepts. How do we actually draw the interior of a room? Well, to do it, you need to know a couple of things. You're going to be pulling for most of it, and you're going to be going to opposite vanishing points quite a bit. So step one, first have a horizon line and plot a vanishing point strategy. Depending on what you want your room to show off, you might want very gentle walls, in which case we've got the angles pulled out, or you might want some extreme perspective in some areas, in which case you might want a vanishing point on the page. Once you've got that drawn out, then you can build. Step two is draw the furthest corner away from you in the room. Step three, draw the left and the right walls in the room. Notice that the left wall goes to the right vanishing point, and the right wall goes to the left vanishing point. That's what I meant by opposites. Once you get the left and the right walls, you'll see a ceiling and a floor, and then it's time to populate the image. You populate it with all the furniture and all the items that you wanted to put inside of it. I always tell my students, have a rough layout of the room already drawn before you start putting it into perspective. That way you have a reference that you can look at to inform your decisions when you go to draw. I also tell my students, plot a cone of view or a line of sight or a field of vision. Here we're going to be standing in this area of the room, which means that everything out here inside this cone is going to be visible. We're going to see this corner, we're going to see this wall, we're going to see this wall. Anything outside of that, however, we're not going to see. Here's a tip for you guys when you're just looking at that blank sheet of paper and you have that layout and you see this cone of vision, you're like, where the heck do I put things on the paper? Well, here's a nice little trick, is to draw a perpendicular line across the cone. Now that can be here, it could be way down here, it could be way up here. It really doesn't matter. You just need a line there that intersects perpendicularly to it. And one thing that I help my students start off with is to know where their farthest corner will be located at. So here's the furthest corner away from us. We're only going to see this one corner in the shot. And so line up a line that goes directly to your line of sight. And where it intersects this perpendicular line, that will be where your corner is on your paper. You see, this perpendicular line represents your paper from left to right, because everything we're going to draw on the paper is only the things that we're going to see. So if we look at our paper, we see this intersection happening maybe on the right quarter of the paper. So that means that right about here is where a corner is going to be located at. Now, we don't know how big or how small that corner is going to be, but we do know that it's going to be in this general area, and we can work from that. So here's what this room would look like in two-point perspective. We only have a little bit of the right wall visible, and because the right wall goes to the left vanishing point, I only extended the left vanishing point a little bit. Because we have a lot of the left wall visible, and the left wall goes to the right vanishing point, I extended the right vanishing point quite a bit. And for beginners, that's a general formula on how to extend your VPs. How much of the wall you have determines how far you'll go with the vanishing point. And you just make several thumbnails and explore different heights of the corner and different distances of the vanishing point until you find a composition that works for you. Now let's widen our field of view a little bit and try to include this left corner. And I'm going to show you when you indent a vanishing point inside your piece and what effect it has. So I've erased the right wall because we've moved the left vanishing point in, and that's going to impact the angle of the right wall. And so let's just build that and see how it changes. So we've got a sharper angle for this wall over here. And what's going to happen is that on this side, we're going to be able to see another corner. And you get to pick, depending on how much of the wall you want visible. So I'm going to stick a corner right here. And what that's done is it's created a third wall on this side. And that third wall, its boss, is this left vanishing point. So everything on that wall will go to that vanishing point. And make a line here at this intersection. And voila! We now have a corner. And right down here where that new wall meets where the floor is, that corner goes to that new vanishing point. So if I wanted to put something on this wall like a poster, I would have to line up the top of that poster and then the bottom of that poster with this vanishing point, and then close off the side and then define the other side of that poster. And so you can see that poster is pretty compressed and distorted because it's so close to the vanishing point here. But it creates a very nice dynamic in the piece. So I'm just going to have a little bit of fun. Let's continue building some things in this image and flesh it out. Let's populate it with a lot of different things. So as always, remember you're drawing in opposites, and you want to think of these inside corners and parts of the ceiling that you would see within something as well. The blue lines represent where your ruler is going to be, and then I draw on top of that from there. So one thing I'd recommend for you students to do as you watch this video taking shape is slow down the YouTube video and go back up and rewatch it if necessary. It really helps to see these forms drawn in front of you in real time, kind of either sped up just as a summary or slowed down as needed. So what are some of the things that I'm focusing on when I'm fleshing out the room? Well, that would be like the visible hallways. That would be things that could become desks, like this right here is just a cube. And then we just cut and remove parts of space from it using your cutting techniques. Other things would be placeholder shapes for posters on the wall, or placeholders for, like here would be fluorescent lights. Going to vanishing point and opposite vanishing points. That's very important to do because it's very easy to think that if a light is flush up against the ceiling, it has to hang down. Well, there's no x-axis if something's flush up against a ceiling or a floor. Always think, what are the small little shapes that are going to be on the things as well? Doorknobs, the 3D sides of doors, the little ridges and rims on the lights. So here's going to be the bed right up close, and it's right in the middle of the camera. And here I'm going to start building the art desk. And here's a great example of how do you build on that indented left vanishing point. And that is a version of my bedroom from high school. It's not exactly the same as the diagram here. There's a few variations, but in general, that's a nice little layout of what you would have seen. So all of these basic cube shapes, that would be what we would call a placeholder. That would be something that you would draw like a cube or a box, and you would eventually turn that into a dresser with all of its drawers and handles and all the cluttered stuff on top of it. You would do all of that last. Making the shapes is just the first step. So I hope you guys found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in class. Take care.